It has finally happened. Finally. Thomas Frank has been sacked by Tottenham Hotspur. I mean, this happened around 20 past 10 this morning, and here's the statement from Tottenham Hotspur. The statement reads, The club has taken the decision to make change in the men's head coach position, and Thomas Frank will leave today. Thomas was appointed in June 2025, and we have been determined to give him time and support needed to build for the future together. However, results and performances have led to the board to conclude that a change at this point in the season is necessary. Throughout his time at the club, Thomas has conducted himself in unwavering commitment, giving everything in his efforts to move the club forward. We would like to thank him for his contribution and wish him every success in the future. So that is the statement released by Tottenham this morning. And the one thing that is interesting about this statement is this bit here. However, results and performances have led to the board to conclude that a change at this point in the season is necessary. Now, realistically, Thomas Frank, probably the Frank out stuff probably started after when we lost to Arsenal, or it's between the Arsenal and the Fulham game. Between that period is when Spurs fans had enough of Thomas Frank. That's when it was getting bad. But then we go down. So we played Fulham on November the 29th. We then go to January the 17th. We lose at home to West Ham. That is when Frank had to go. That's when he had to go. But the board said, we'll give him time. Results been improved. The only wins were in the Champions League against Dortmund and Frankfurt. The Premier League results, 2-2 with Burnley, 2-2 with Manchester City, 2-0 loss against Manchester United, and then last night, 2-1 loss versus Newcastle. The only good result in there is probably a 2-2 draw against Man City, where we came back from 2-0 down against a team that is fighting for the league title with Arsenal. But it's bad because ever since that Fulham game on November the 29th, we are taking away Champions League, FA Cup, whatever. Since November the 29th, Tottenham Hotspur have won 2 Premier League matches. Those wins against Brentford and Crystal Palace. Ever since Fulham, 2-2 v Newcastle, 2-0 win against Brentford, 3-0 loss against Forest, 2-1 loss against Liverpool, 1-0 win against Palace, 0-0 against Brentford, 1-1 with Sunderland, 3-2 loss against Bournemouth, 2-1 loss against West Ham, 2-2 draw with Burnley, 2-2 draw with Man City, 2-0 loss against Man United, and then a 2-1 defeat at home to Newcastle. Our last win in general was against Palace on December the 28th. 2 Premier League wins since November the 29th. And you're telling me only now that the results and performances have been bad. The results and performances have been bad since the end of November. They've been bad since the end of November, and they've just decided to sack him now, when we've won 2 Premier League matches since the end of November. Seriously, it's a joke. But he's gone now, and it's good, because it's about time that he's gone, because like I said, performances were terrible, results were terrible, the fans were so disconnected with everything. They were disconnected with Frank, disconnected with the ownership, with the players. I mean, the players weren't fighting for the manager. The players looked lost. The players looked clueless. You got half of the players coming out, or Romero in particular, coming out and blaming the board. And just everything under Thomas Frank was an absolute disaster. And he's not even arguably, he is the worst manager in the club's history. And it's a fact it's a fact as well that he is the worst manager out of any of the big six. Win ratio about 18%. That's the worst of any manager to manage in the big six. Absolutely, honestly, it's terrible. It's terrible. But the question is now, where did Tottenham Hotspur Football Club go from here? What happens now? It looks like it's going to be an interim until the end of the season. Which, personally, I think is the right call to do. There's no point getting another permanent manager in now. There's 12 Premier League matches to go. You know, like I said, there's just no point, really. I mean, overall, there's probably around between 12 to 14 matches Tottenham Hotspur have got to play this season, because obviously Spurs are still in the Champions League. But realistically, we'll probably get knocked out in the round of 16 or potentially the quarterfinals. But like I said, it's interim. And who do we get? That is the next question. Who do we get as interim manager until the end of the year? I've heard names left, right and centre. I've heard Ryan Mason. I've heard Harry Redknapp. I've heard Roberto De Zerbi. I've heard Xavi. I've heard a lot of names. Personally, Harry Redknapp, no thanks. I mean, I've heard Sam Allardyce as well. Redknapp and Allardyce, no thanks. Yeah, they're experts at keeping teams up in the Premier League, but I can understand that maybe that is the aim at the moment, to keep the club in the Premier League, but no thanks. I'm just not a fan. I mean, Heitinger's up there as well. I wouldn't be surprised if they give it to John Heitinger. I know his previous job at Ajax didn't go too great, but he's already at the football club. But the problem is, if Tottenham do appoint John Heitinger, the football will probably be the same as Thomas Frank. It might be, I don't know. I didn't really see what Heitinger did at Ajax. I mean, I'm sure if there's any Ajax fans watching this video, they'll tell me in the comments what Heitinger was like. But I wouldn't be surprised if Heitinger is appointed. But then, the two names that are coming to my head on an interim basis are Ryan Mason and Roberto De Zerbi. Ryan Mason, I mean, I know towards the end of his tenure at West Bromwich Albion, didn't go great. You know, it was West Brom, were falling down the table in the Championship, and it just wasn't great. But Ryan Mason's been the interim manager before. He knows what it takes to just come in and do a job for a certain amount of games. So I wouldn't be surprised if the club go and get Ryan Mason again. I generally wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. And plus as well, like I said, he's done it before. He knows what the club's like. He knows what's expected. He knows most of the players anyway, because obviously he was part of Ange Postecoglou's coaching staff. But it was part of Ange Postecoglou's coaching staff. But yeah, but then also Roberto De Zerbi. Obviously, I think he resigned from Marseille overnight. And again, I actually wouldn't mind Roberto De Zerbi. I think he has said as well that he wants to return to the Premier League. And why not come and steer the ship, Roberto? Why not? I think he's a decent manager. And, he's very passionate. He's a very passionate guy. We've seen it at Marseille. Forcing I think 2 players out of the club. Forcing 2 players out of the club. I think it was Rabiot and Jonathan Rowe. I think it was. He forced them out of Marseille. He was begging for Balerdi to leave the other day. And he's a passionate guy. He wants his team to be the better they can be. And I wouldn't mind De Zerbi, because I think he could get something out of the players. And I think he can get us out of this position that we're in. And I think he can get us towards mid-table. And, a big ask, maybe push for Europe. But I doubt Spurs will be pushing for Europe. But I generally wouldn't mind De Zerbi at all, to be fair. I think he's a good manager. And I think, until the end of the year, I think he'll be a good fit. He'll get something out of the players. Players might show a bit more fight, a bit more passion, a bit more grit. And like I said, I just think he could steer us in the right direction. And then, yeah. But then you could all... But then... it's the same with Man United at the moment. Carrick's doing decent at the moment. Do Man United give Carrick the job? on a permanent basis, because let's say if we do get De Zerbi and De Zerbi does well, do you then appoint Roberto De Zerbi on a permanent basis to be the new permanent manager? I don't know really. But speaking of the new permanent manager, it has to be Poch, doesn't it? It has to be. I think. I mean, my thing was on Sky Sports Fan Club yesterday, and I said that 90 to 95% of Tottenham fans want Pochettino to come back to the club. Pochettino himself, it looks like he wants to come back. He was on a podcast with the former BT Sport presenter Jake Humphrey. I mean, Humphrey asked him a question about which club does he, have the most connection with. And he said Tottenham, and, he spoke very positively about Tottenham. And, I mean, he was with Jesus Perez, his assistant. Jesus was speaking positively about Tottenham as well. And, really, I mean, realistically, it has to be Pochettino. The fans would 100% get behind Poch. And Pochettino said as well in numerous interviews and stuff that he's been on that there's unfinished business, and he said as well in that podcast that he wants to win the Premier League, he wants to win the Champions League, and he looks like he wants to do that with Tottenham. He wants to do that with Tottenham Hotspur, and I think the board bring Poch back, and then we go from there really. And yeah, I just think Pochettino is the right fit, really. The fans will get behind him. He's the right fit for the club. And like I said a couple of minutes ago, he knows he has unfinished business. He knows what the club wants. He knows how big the club is, and he knows that a club like Tottenham shouldn't be where we are at the moment. And maybe if we appoint Pochettino, if we get him back, maybe we can get back to where we should be, and fighting for league titles, and doing well in other competitions and stuff. But we'll have to see what happens. But Frank's gone, happy days. But yeah, let's just see how the rest of the season goes. Of course, Arsenal it is next game. We'll have to find out who's going to be the manager for that game, and let's just get the season done with. Let's just not get relegated. And put in the comments, Spurs fans, or even if you're not a Spurs fan, put in the comments thoughts on Frank being sacked. Who should be the next manager, whether it's interim or permanent. You can do both if you want. I don't really care. But yeah, thanks for watching. Goodbye.